Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know that this game is about talking and communicating and telling people your story and so on. But and if the story is of interest, people will listen to it and they'll want to hear it. But often people don't want something said, and they want to censor people in what they have to say. Our next guest was with us 6 years ago. He was told not to talk, or if he did talk, he would be killed. Just that. But talk he did, and he came here under threat to the Late Late Show to tell his complete story. And 6 years later, 6 years ago on the show, he was saying that he was looking forward to the following year when perhaps he would be free to move around the world as a free person and untrammeled by threats. It hasn't happened. Would you welcome, please, Salman Rushdie. Good day, Sal. Good to see you. Do sit down. Now, you're on the circuit, publicising your new book, The Ground Beneath Her Feet. What is your present situation, Salman, with regard to security and so on?
Well, there is still some bit around, but I really think, you know, it's different now. There was an arrangement between the British government and the Iranian government last year when they basically removed the threats, and there is some need for continuing precautions because of splinter groups inside Iran and so on, but it's not the same as it was, and I really think finally, I seem to be getting back to, you know, to the world of books, getting off the front page and back into the literary section.
But it only needs one hothead, one daft guy, one solo
Yeah,
operator.
but you know that you can't think like that. Otherwise, you'd never cross the road, you know, in case you were hit by a car. So, I mean, my own feeling is enough already. It's beginning to feel pretty anachronistic, all that stuff,
yes.
and you know, the world changes and moves on, and I just think, you know, the thing I can do is write my books, and so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, but you still have security around.
There's still a bit. Yeah,
our boys are still outside
there
looking after you tonight and so on.
Yeah.
But you don't. It's when you get complacent about it is the real danger, I suppose. Yeah?
Oh, I'm not complacent about it. I just have things to do.
Okay. So you gave a talk tonight. You were down.
Yeah, I was reading in Temple Bar, and that was great fun. You know, people just I read a bit of the new book, and people seemed to like it.
Yes.
I mean, I've always felt very close to Irish writing, you know, because it was one of the things, I mean, Joyce and so on was one of the things that taught me how to write. And I still reread Ulysses in order to learn how it's done, and don't seem to be able to do it that way, but then nobody else can either.
This is based on Orpheus and Eurydice,
yes.
The myth of, but you work in rock and roll, and you work in a rock and roll band and so on. How familiar are you with rock and roll, and where are you in it?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with it, you know, because I grew up around it. I mean, it got to Bombay, incidentally. I mean, and yesterday I was hearing that from somebody that, you know, at the same time as I was listening to early, you know, Elvis and Little Richard, and my mother was trying to make me listen to Pat Boone, there were people in China also saying that they didn't understand Beethoven or Mozart, but they understood Elvis. And I think that something about rock and roll music spread across the world like lightning, at a time when the world didn't have global mass communications, which makes it even more remarkable that it did that. And so I've thought of it as like the soundtrack of my life in a way, and so it became quite a natural way of stitching together a book that looks at many different parts of the world, because the music went everywhere.
And living in Bombay and from your background, it didn't seem Western to you,
no,
did it?
It didn't. I mean, that's in retrospect, it's very odd that. But listening to Elvis singing Hound Dog, you know, I mean, I'd never seen a hound dog.
To start with, yeah.
No, but the music seemed as if it came from next door and it belonged to us as well. And I think that was the experience of young people all over the world. You know, so I think for all of us, it was music that seemed to belong to us, and our parents disapproved. You know, and so it was kind of oppositional music and generational music, and I think it grew up with us. You know, so when I got to Britain, it was just about the time when a real revolution in the music was happening there, because of the Beatles and so on.
Carnaby Street and all of that, yeah.
So it just felt like a part of that. And I lived on the King's Road in the summer of love, so that was fun.
I was told you used to do an imitation of Elvis. You used to get up and wiggle the old hips and do your thing.
The pelvis was in better shape in those days. I have to say.
So you don't try it.
You don't want to see it now.
Well, when you came then, when you came to Carnaby Street in London and so on, everybody was pointed in your direction, because the Beatles were leading the rush to play sitars and going to see the guru in India and listening to his wisdom. Does that sound peculiar to you?
Well, it was completely peculiar, because the India I'd come from was a great big city, you know, which is fully the equal of London or New York or anywhere, and yet the India in people's minds was this very mystical place full of, you know, gurus and lentils and yoga and so on and so on. And I didn't know what that was, but it had one great advantage, which is that for like 10 minutes in the history of the world, it was very, very sexy to come from India. And I was 20 at the time. So you would just say India, and girls would go weak at the knees.
So you didn't lose out at all.
It was completely unscrupulous.
Pretty good time. Yeah. Now, getting back to the book, you work in rock and roll, and you work in a tragedy, and you work in love and romance, and a lot of sex. A lot of sex
this time.
Yes. And just like your other books, Satanic Verses, of course, which I remember reading because you were on the show that time. It's a long, involved story.
It's a long yarn,
you know.
But I like long yarns, and I think certainly when I'm enjoying a book, I don't like it to end, you know, and I like to live in that world. And this is, it's a book that begins in India at the time of the British Empire. It ends in New York at the time of the American Empire, and it tells a love story of lovers who move between those worlds, literally between those worlds, but also in a way. In the last half century, that's a move we all made, you know, between the period of British dominance and the period of American dominance. And so it's also about that. But most of all, I wanted to write a love story. You know, that was my going-in position, was to find a way of writing a contemporary love story that didn't fall into either of the great traps these days of too much sentimentality or too much cynicism, you know, but to find a way of writing about passion, you know, head on.
Yes. And when did you first meet Bono?
It must be 7 or 8 years ago.
7 or 8 years ago.
Yes. I went to, at his invitation, went to a concert at Earl's Court in London during the, I suppose, Achtung Baby tour it was, and we got on, and then a couple of years after that, when the band were playing Wembley Stadium, they invited me to go on stage as a gesture of support for free speech and so on, and so I had the odd experience of playing Wembley.
Yes, but you didn't fly in by helicopter at dead of night to land on the beach in Killiney instead.
No, that's all nonsense. You know, that's all. Unfortunately, when newspapers try and make up stories, unfortunately, it's usually bad fiction. You know? If I wanted to make up a story about me and Bono, I could make up a better one than that.
Yeah, but you were in Killiney. You did.
I've been there a few times, you know, but the idea of living there for 4.5 years is bizarre.
Go back to London and attending the Guru and all of that, and spirituality, and these people looking for spirituality and looking for the secret of life and all. Are you a spiritual person, as they say, a spiritual person?
You know, I think the word's been exactly that. The word's been overused, you know, and it's become rather a kind of debased word, and I think we should just give it a rest.
Yes.
I'm very interested in the human spirit and in what it's capable of, and in what we are able to dream up for ourselves and our imaginative lives and so on. But I resist the word spiritual because it's become a kind of Californian, empty word. So I think we leave it alone for 200 years or so. It might start meaning something again.
And what about poor Glenn Hoddle?
Well, you know, the thing about me and Glenn is that we go back a long way, because I'm a Spurs fan.
Yes.
So I remember when Glenn used to give me a lot of pleasure in the great Spurs team where he played with Ozzy Ardiles and so on and so on. And then, unfortunately, he turned into a dork, you know. and it's because he stopped talking with his feet and he started talking with his mouth, you know, and what ended up is the foot ended up in the mouth.
Yes.
You know? And I just thought, go back to your feet, Glenn, you know, stick with the feet.
And what was your reaction to what he was trying to say at that time?
Well, it was just terribly jumbled, what he was trying to say, poor man. You know, I don't believe he's a malicious man. I just think he's not very articulate. And he jumbled up a whole series of ideas, bits from Christianity, bits from Buddhism, bits from Hinduism, and kind of the way it came out sounded absolutely terrible. But I think that, you know, he basically lost his job because he didn't know how to speak very well. And that's probably not a good idea.
I read recently that you're going back to Bombay, but you're tentative about it, nervous about it.
Well, I haven't been back for a long time, and that's always odd, you know, to go back to your hometown, to the place where you were a child, after quite a long period of estrangement. I mean, I hope it'll be fun, you know. I mean, it's going to be interesting to try and regain that old sense of connection. It'll either come back or it won't, and I hope it does.
Now, Bono has taken the words of The Ground Beneath Her Feet and lyrics and put music to them and so on, all of that. Is that being released at the same time as the book, or is that?
No, the book's out.
The book's out,
I think all that happened is that I sent him a copy of the book, and there's a song in the book.
Yes.
A lyric in the book with the same title as the book, The Ground Beneath Her Feet, and so it's, I guess it's the title track, I suppose one would say, and now that I have to learn about the music biz. And he wrote a very beautiful melody to it, which which I believe will be on their next album whenever that is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have Bono later on in the show. Just one last thing. After all the avoidance and death and everything else, you had a bad crash in Australia, which almost wrote you off.
Yes, I did. And that was a couple of years ago when I was there, and I'd was driving down after doing the book tour stuff to stay with friends for Christmas. And in this tiny village with the very literary name of Milton, we were hit by a very large truck. And I mean, actually, it was a truckload of fertilizer. And it mercifully didn't kill us, and it didn't shed its load. But I must say, I thought that after everything that had happened, to be destroyed by a truckload of fertilizer.
What a way to go. Terrible, terrible. Yeah. Well, thank you very much indeed for being on. You did your reading tonight. You're not doing a signing or anything tomorrow.
No, I'm not. I've done it today. But I did want to ask you something.
Yes,
now that you're going to have a bit of time.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know, are you going to write a novel? I think it's about time.
Don't think so, Salman. Wrote 2 books, wrote 1 book myself and wrote another book in cooperation with Deirdre Purcell. I think that's my bit. Yeah. I think I've done. So don't worry about any competition.
No, I was getting a bit nervous, but I'm pleased.
But I might come up with something, you never know.
And many congratulations. It's wonderful to be here to tell you that.
Thank you. Well, many congratulations to you for still being here. Do you see in the next 2 years all of this thing being over?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. I just think that everybody's gradually calming down, and I think enough already, and back to books, and
get on with your work.
Yeah,
well done.
Exactly.
Okay, long life and happiness to you. Thank you very much indeed. Salman Rushdie, ladies and gentlemen. Well done. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. I'll see you later on. Thank you.